Blind date disaster? The waitress dropped a note saying she's not who you think. The soft hum of a piano filled the air, blending with the quiet clinking of glasses and the low murmur of conversation. The restaurant was nestled in the heart of the city, its lighting warm and golden, casting a gentle glow over every polished surface, a place for whispered promises, for first impressions dressed in silk and charm. Ethan Blake stepped inside, adjusting the cuff of his tailored navy suit. At 35, he had become one of the youngest CEOs in the state, a man respected for both his vision and restraint, and yet tonight he felt slightly out of place. He did not like blind dates, never had, but his best friend had insisted. "She's stunning and different," he had said. "Just give yourself a chance to see people outside of business deals." So Ethan had come, more out of courtesy than curiosity. A hostess led him to a candlelit table near the window, and waiting there, with a flawless smile and legs crossed elegantly, was Sabrina. She stood to greet him, her red dress hugging her curves with confidence, her brown hair cascaded in soft waves, her red lips perfectly painted. She extended her hand with practiced charm. "Ethan, right? I have been looking forward to this." Her voice was smooth, deliberate. He smiled politely and shook her hand. "Sabrina, nice to meet you." They sat. Within minutes, she was complimenting his company, quoting headlines, reciting investment figures with uncanny precision. She laughed in all the right places, smiled on cue, yet something felt scripted. Her eyes, though striking, were cold, calculating, and more than once, Ethan noticed her glancing at her phone, tapping quickly before sliding it face down. He kept the conversation flowing, but his instincts prickled. Something was off. From the corner of his eye, a flicker of motion caught his attention. A young waitress moved between tables with quiet efficiency. Blonde hair tied up high, no makeup, no flashy earrings, just clean, precise movements. Her uniform crisp, her eyes alert. She had a quiet beauty, not the kind that turned heads instantly, but the kind that lingered. Emily Hart. She noticed everything, every movement, every pause, every look, and she had seen Sabrina earlier. Not alone, but seated with a man in a black blazer. She had overheard enough to be unsettled, enough to know that this date wasn't what it seemed. Now, as Sabrina excused herself to the restroom, Emily made her move. She approached the table, stepping lightly. Ethan looked up, slightly surprised. She placed a folded note beside his water glass. "She's not who you think," it read in neat handwriting. He looked up at her, startled. She leaned in, voice low but steady. "Earlier, before you arrived, I saw her with a man named Daniel. I overheard them talking about using this date to get close to you. She said she would charm you, steal project details, and help take your company down." Ethan's eyes narrowed, shifting from confusion to sharp focus. Emily straightened her posture. "I don't know you, but I couldn't pretend I didn't hear it." She turned and walked away, returning to the counter as if nothing had happened. Ethan stared at the note. His mind reeled. Could it be true? Ethan sat still, his fingers grazing the edge of the folded note. His eyes lingered on the simple yet weighty words. "She's not who you think." No visible reaction crossed his face. Calm, composed, he quietly slid the note toward the edge of the table, as if it were nothing more than a misplaced receipt. When Sabrina returned, her smile remained flawless, confident, even charming. She carried herself like someone who believed she still had full control of the evening. Ethan looked up and returned the smile, warm and effortless. But behind his calm expression, something had shifted. He didn't confront. He didn't question. Instead, he listened. The conversation continued as before, but now Ethan heard every word differently. He noticed things, how she slipped on a name of one of his senior directors, how she mixed up the timeline of a recent acquisition. Each small misstep was quickly covered by a playful laugh, a touch on the wrist, or a flattering comment. But Ethan, trained in reading people across countless boardrooms, had stopped being charmed. His eyes followed the subtle tilt of her phone when she thought he wasn't looking, the way her fingers tapped quickly beneath the table. He noted the tone she used when deflecting, the way she stalled on simple business references. It was all too smooth, too rehearsed. Then came the message. A discreet vibration on his own phone. He glanced down. A video. Short, low resolution. Security footage from earlier that evening, sent from a discreet source he trusted. The restaurant's management team had worked with his company before. A quiet favor called in without drawing attention. The clip showed Sabrina seated in the same booth, but not alone. A man in a black blazer leaned toward her, speaking closely. No affection, just intensity, strategy. Their posture said everything. Ethan paused the video, staring at the frozen frame. Confirmation. He looked up slowly, his expression still unreadable. Dinner continued without drama. No raised voices, no accusations, just a quiet ending to an evening that had already served its purpose. When the check arrived, Ethan reached for his wallet. He stood, buttoning his jacket with calm precision. Then, finally, he looked at her. Really looked. His gaze was steady, cool, final. "Thank you," he said quietly. "But we won't be seeing each other again." No anger, no drama, just truth, delivered with grace sharper than any insult. Sabrina hesitated. For a moment, she held her smile like a shield, but she saw it in his eyes. The game was over. She rose without a word, gathering her purse with a stiff flick of her wrist. Her heels clicked across the floor, and though she didn't look back, Ethan could feel the tension in her shoulders as she walked away, defeated not by confrontation, but by silence. He remained standing for a beat, letting the moment settle. He never once mentioned the note, never spoke Emily's name. She had risked enough already. As the hum of the restaurant returned to its rhythm, Ethan turned slightly. Behind the counter, Emily was wiping down a tray, pretending to be absorbed in her task, but her posture was tight, avoiding his gaze. Ethan stepped forward. He reached the counter and gently set the menu down. Just another customer ready to leave. She glanced up, uncertain. He smiled, soft, sincere. No questions, no explanations, just a quiet offer. "Have you had your coffee tonight?" She blinked, caught off guard, then shook her head, almost imperceptibly. Ethan nodded toward a small table by the window, the same one where so much had just unraveled. It wasn't a move, it wasn't a favor. It was gratitude, offered in the gentlest way. Emily hesitated, then followed. No words passed between them, but something had already begun to shift, something unspoken, something real. And that, Ethan thought, was the only truth worth holding on to tonight. Rain tapped gently on the canopy above the cafe's outdoor seating. The late afternoon light was dim, soft and gray, casting a quiet mood over the city. Ethan Blake sat across from Emily Hart, his espresso untouched, his attention entirely on the woman before him. She sat with her back straight, hands wrapped around a plain ceramic mug. Her blonde hair was damp at the edges, wisps escaping the neat ponytail she always wore at work. The uniform was gone, replaced by a light sweater and jeans. Simple, modest, real. "Thank you," Ethan said after a moment of silence. "For the other night." Emily looked up, her eyes clear. "I just couldn't walk away from something like that. I know it wasn't my place." "But it was," Ethan replied. "You spoke up when most people wouldn't." She gave a small shrug. "Maybe. Or maybe I've just seen too many people get used and thrown away." Ethan leaned forward, intrigued. "That sounds like experience talking." Emily sipped her coffee before answering. "My mom's been sick for a few years now. I work double shifts, this cafe during the day, a grocery store at night. We manage." Ethan's brow furrowed. "That sounds like a lot." Emily gave a soft laugh. "It is, but you do what you have to when someone you love needs you." He glanced down at her hands, slender fingers, but the skin was rough in places, tiny scars near the knuckles, a small burn mark on the back of her wrist. Hands that worked, hands that sacrificed. I don't understand how someone like you noticed something like that scheme. Most people would have ignored it, gone about their shift. Emily looked away for a second, her tone thoughtful. I notice people. It is kind of hard not to when you serve them all day. Most just talk and never really listen. You learn to pick up the little things, tones, glances, timing. That woman wasn't in love, she was in control. Ethan studied her with quiet respect. There was no bitterness in her voice, just calm observation. "You're sharp," he said. Emily chuckled. "Is that your way of saying I do not look the type?" "I meant it as a compliment," he replied sincerely. She nodded, her fingers absently tracing the rim of her cup. "I don't really dream big anymore. Life narrowed down when Mom got sick. I take each day as it comes. Keep the bills paid, try to smile through it. That's enough." Ethan was silent. Something about her hit a part of him he kept locked away, the part that remembered what it meant to fight for something that mattered. "To love without expecting reward. You deserve more," he said quietly. Emily met his eyes. "Maybe, but I am not waiting for a miracle." A beat passed. The sound of rain filled the space between them. Then her phone buzzed. She checked it, face shifting slightly. "I have to get back," she said, standing up. Ethan rose with her. "Let me walk you to the corner." She shook her head gently. "It is just a block. You do not have to." "I know," he said. They stood there, under the awning, for a second longer than necessary. He looked down at her, and she looked up at him. No promises, no flirtation, just something unspoken that hung in the misty air. Emily gave a soft smile. "Thanks for the coffee." Ethan returned the smile. "Next one's on me." She turned and walked into the rain, her footsteps light, her back straight. He watched her until she turned the corner, and even then, he kept looking. A cup of coffee had never felt so important. It was a gray Monday morning. The sky hung low with heavy clouds, and traffic crawled sluggishly through the city streets. Ethan Blake, sharply dressed in a tailored navy suit, gripped the steering wheel of his sleek black car, his mind already occupied with the presentation he was about to deliver at an important shareholder meeting. He turned down a quieter street near a small park, hoping to save a few minutes. That was when he saw her. An elderly woman, walking slowly with a cane, stumbled on the uneven sidewalk. Her knees buckled, and in a terrifying instant, she collapsed backward onto the cold concrete. A few pedestrians glanced her way but kept walking. No one stopped. Without hesitation, Ethan swerved to the side of the road and jumped out of his car. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he called out, already dialing emergency services. The woman's hand trembled as she tried to sit up. Her breathing was shallow. Ethan gently crouched beside her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Do not worry, I've got you. I'm taking you to the hospital," he said calmly. After a brief conversation with the 911 operator, Ethan realized help might take too long. He decided to take matters into his own hands. Carefully lifting the frail woman, he opened the rear door and eased her into the back seat, cushioning her head with his folded coat. At the hospital, the ER team quickly took the woman inside. A nurse handed Ethan a clipboard. "Can you fill this out, sir? You're listed as the person who brought her in." "I don't know her name," Ethan admitted, "but here's my contact information." He signed the form and sat for a moment in the waiting room, watching the rhythm of urgency and calm in the ER. Something in him felt quieter. He rose to leave, but just as he turned toward the door, he heard a soft sob. On one of the cold plastic chairs sat Emily Hart. Her blonde hair was pulled into a messy ponytail. Her eyes were red, hands gripping the edge of her coat as if to stop them from shaking. "Are you the daughter of the elderly woman who just came in?" a nurse asked gently. Emily nodded, unable to speak. Ethan paused. Then, as if guided by something beyond logic, he walked toward her. She looked up, and their eyes met. It was a collision of shock, disbelief, and something deeply human. "You," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You brought her here?" He gave a soft nod. "I saw her fall. I couldn't just drive by." Emily stood abruptly, her body tense, eyes wide. I do not know how to thank you," she stammered. "I was running late, my second job. She sometimes takes walks when I am not home." Her voice cracked. She turned her face away. Ethan reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a card, and placed it gently in her hand. "If you ever need anything," he said quietly, "do not hesitate." He didn't offer pity. He didn't ask for gratitude. He simply looked at her with the same sincerity he had shown when rescuing her mother. Emily looked down at the card. Her fingers trembled. Her tears, this time, were not only for her mother, but for the overwhelming kindness she had just experienced. "I hope your mother recovers soon," Ethan added, his voice soft but firm. He turned to leave, giving her the space she clearly needed. Emily stood still for a long while, staring at the card, her heart pounding. She had never expected to see him again, not like this. The man who once sat across from her at a late-night coffee, who had listened without judgment, who had believed her silent warning, was now the same man who had saved the most important person in her life, not because he had to, but because he chose to. And in that quiet, fluorescent-lit hallway, something shifted between them, something unspoken, but deeply understood. Not just a chance meeting, a connection, and maybe the beginning of something more. Ethan tried to return to his usual rhythm: early mornings, back-to-back meetings, numbers, forecasts, boardrooms filled with suits and controlled voices. But Emily's face kept appearing in the corners of his mind, uninvited and unforgettable. He found himself wondering about her far more often than he expected. It was not just the bravery she had shown the night she slipped him that note, or the quiet strength she displayed outside the ER that day. It was something deeper, a resilience that intrigued him. Out of both concern and curiosity, he asked someone on his security team, a man he trusted implicitly, to do a discreet background check. Nothing invasive, nothing that would breach her privacy. He made that very clear. "I just want to know where she's from, what kind of life she's had. Be respectful." What he learned only deepened his admiration. Emily Hart lived in a small apartment on the edge of the city, in a neighborhood most people like Ethan never stepped foot in. The building was old, the walls thin, the plumbing unreliable. She worked 2 jobs, waitressing at the cafe during the weekdays and cleaning office spaces overnight. On weekends, she volunteered at a local youth center, teaching reading and writing to underprivileged children. No vacations, no social media glamour, no boyfriend, just work, family, and community. When he read the report, Ethan leaned back in his chair, silent. She had every reason to be bitter at the world, but she was not. Days passed. Ethan did not reach out, but he paid attention in other ways, sometimes driving past the cafe on his way home, or glancing at his phone whenever it lit up, half hoping for a message that never came. Then, one rainy afternoon, it happened. Ethan was leaving a lunch meeting when he saw her, on the far side of the corporate district, where the pavement shimmered with fresh rain and umbrellas bloomed like dark flowers. Emily was standing outside a pharmacy, holding her bag tight against her chest. She looked tired. An elderly security guard from the nearby office building was struggling with his umbrella, clearly soaked through. Without hesitation, Emily walked over, extended her own umbrella above him, and waited until a bus arrived. Ethan watched from inside his car. She was completely drenched by the time the guard boarded the bus. She turned and began walking down the street, her coat clinging to her frame, her shoes soaked through, and that was when Ethan noticed. Her shoes were worn out, the soles cracked. One had a tear near the toe. She did not even seem to care. He sat frozen behind the wheel, heart thudding. It was not pity he felt. It was something warmer, something almost painful. It reminded him of someone, his sister. She had passed away years ago in a tragic accident. She had been kind, soft-spoken, always thinking of others. He never thought he would meet anyone like her again. Until now. That evening, he returned to the cafe. Emily was behind the counter, tying an apron around her waist when she noticed him. Her expression shifted from surprise to hesitation. Before she could speak, Ethan smiled slightly and said, "I am not here to make things awkward." She relaxed a little. He placed a hand on the counter and looked her in the eyes. "Would you consider working somewhere else?" Emily blinked. "Excuse me? I need someone like you," he said simply. "Not for coffee, for something that actually matters." She tilted her head. "What kind of work?" "My company's CSR division is expanding. We need someone who understands people, who sees what others miss, someone who actually cares." Emily's lips parted slightly. She did not know what to say. Ethan continued, "I know it is a lot to ask, but you do not belong behind a counter. You belong somewhere you can build something." Emily stared at him for a moment, eyes wide. Then, quietly, she asked, "Why me?" Ethan's voice softened. "Because you helped me, without knowing who I was, and you keep helping people every single day. That kind of character? You cannot teach that." She looked down, then up again, something fragile yet unbreakable shining in her eyes. "Can I think about it?" "Of course," Ethan said. "But I hope you say yes." And with that, he left, not with a contract, not with pressure, but with hope. Hope that the woman who had quietly changed the course of his life might soon become a part of something even bigger. The lobby of Blake & Co. was polished marble and soft lighting. Emily Hart stepped inside with hesitant steps, the buzz of business suits and echoing heels surrounding her. She clutched her new employee badge close to her chest. "Administrative Assistant, CSR Division," it read. 3 words that suddenly meant her world had shifted. Her first days were quiet. She spoke little, took notes, listened carefully. But within the first week, people began to notice her. Emily's organizational skills, her calm under pressure, and her way of making even the interns feel seen, it all stood out. Ethan watched from a distance. She was nothing like the corporate professionals he had hired before. Emily thanked the janitor by name. She brought coffee to the security guards at the night shift. She volunteered for the tasks others avoided. But what impressed Ethan the most was how she approached every task, big or small, with full heart and clarity. They first worked closely together at a charity event for underprivileged children. The planning was a mess. Vendors canceled. A sponsor pulled out. Tensions ran high in the boardroom. Emily, quietly flipping through backup contacts, found a local caterer and rallied volunteers from the reading center she used to work for. The event went on, laughter echoing through the park, children with painted faces and sticky fingers clinging to balloons. Ethan caught Emily smiling as she helped a little girl tie her shoelace. Later that day, a journalist asked Ethan for a comment. He simply nodded toward Emily. "She's the reason today happened," he said. Their next challenge came during a media backlash. A misinterpreted photo had gone viral, accusing the company of exploiting the charity work for profit. Panic rippled through the PR department. Emily stayed late that night, organizing every fact, compiling testimonials from families they helped, drafting a calm and genuine response. Ethan, reading her report at 2 a.m., felt something shift in his chest again. Then came the day of the school fundraiser. The CSR team hosted a street event with games and music. Emily moved through the crowd, managing everything while holding a clipboard and encouraging shy kids to join the fun. Ethan stood nearby, watching her laugh with a boy who had just won a stuffed bear. Suddenly, chaos. A young boy darted into the street, chasing a balloon. A car was turning the corner fast. Before anyone could react, Emily dropped her clipboard and sprinted. She reached the boy in seconds, shoving him back toward the sidewalk, just as the car screeched to a halt, barely missing them. But Emily had stumbled. Her knee slammed into the pavement, her palm scraped and bleeding. Ethan ran. By the time he reached her, Emily was sitting upright, trying to wave off the pain. But Ethan knelt, lifted her into his arms without a word, and carried her to the car. At the hospital, once she was treated and bandaged, he stood by the bed gripping the rail tight. "You scared me," he said finally, voice low, shaking. Emily blinked, surprised. "He was just a kid. I couldn't—" "I know," Ethan interrupted. He stepped closer, his eyes locked with hers. "Don't ever do that again. Without me next to you." His voice cracked at the end, and for the first time, Emily saw not the CEO, not the powerful man in a suit, but someone who cared, deeply, about her. The late afternoon sun poured golden light over the garden behind Ethan's estate. It painted the leaves in honeyed tones and made the stone paths glow softly. A breeze whispered through the trees, rustling branches with a gentleness that matched the moment. It was the kind of quiet warmth that made everything feel a little softer, a little slower. Emily stepped through the French doors, her hand gently wrapped around her mother's. They paused on the terrace, taking in the serene view, flowering hedges, winding walkways, and a small stone fountain murmuring in the center. "This is beautiful," Emily whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Ethan appeared in the doorway behind them, dressed not in his usual tailored suit, but in a soft blue sweater and dark slacks. The change was subtle, but to Emily, it said everything. He wasn't trying to impress, he was simply being present. He walked toward them with a warm smile. "I'm glad you came." Her mother, Mrs. Hart, nodded, her voice formal but kind. "Thank you for having us, Mr. Blake." "Please," he replied with a light chuckle. "Call me Ethan. And thank you for raising someone as remarkable as Emily." Emily blushed. She glanced down quickly, fingers tightening slightly around her modest purse. Compliments always made her uncomfortable, especially the ones that felt too kind, too generous. They moved toward the garden dining area, a long wooden table set beneath gently glowing lanterns strung overhead. The setting was thoughtful, charming, nothing ostentatious. Dinner was simple: roast chicken with herbs, steamed vegetables, warm rolls with butter. It was the kind of meal that made people feel at home. Emily noticed the little things. Ethan served her mother's plate first. He listened without interrupting. He asked questions without condescension. Her mother began to relax, even smile. Midway through the meal, over a cup of tea, Mrs. Hart looked at Ethan and said, "Do you know, when Emily was 8, we had one winter coat between us." Ethan glanced up, curious. Emily shifted in her seat, her face already turning red. "One day," her mother continued, "Emily came home without it. I asked where it went. She told me a girl in her class had blue hands from the cold, so she gave it away, just like that." Emily murmured, "I was fine. We layered sweaters for a week. It wasn't a big deal." Her mother smiled, shaking her head. "It was everything." Ethan swallowed, his throat tightening. He looked at Emily, seeing her in a different light yet again. After dinner, when the air cooled and the lanterns cast soft halos of light across the garden, Ethan suggested a walk. Emily agreed. Her mother, tired from the day, chose to stay behind and rest inside. They strolled slowly down the stone path, the hum of insects rising with the twilight. Fireflies began to flicker, tiny stars in the hedges. Ethan was quiet at first. Then he spoke. "You changed how I see the world." Emily looked over at him, brows raised. "I've built my life on logic," he said. "On deals, strategies, and risk calculations. I know how to grow wealth, but you invest in people, quietly, constantly, and it changes everything." Emily let out a small laugh, brushing hair from her cheek. "I just do what I can." He stopped walking. She stopped too. "I used to think kindness was weakness," Ethan said, voice low. "Then I met you." His hand hovered for a moment, then gently found hers. Not tightly, just enough. Emily looked up at him, eyes soft, not afraid, not uncertain, but open. In the distance, the fountain murmured, the gardenia scent drifted through the air, and for the first time in years, Ethan didn't feel like he was chasing something. He felt still, and in that stillness, he saw her, Not the waitress, not the assistant, not the woman who'd once slipped him a note, but simply Emily. And she saw him. Not the CEO, just Ethan. 1 year later, the atmosphere inside Blake & Co.'s community division was brighter, more hopeful than ever. Children's drawings adorned the walls, the sound of light laughter echoed from meetings, and every project seemed to carry a human touch that had once been missing. At the center of it all was Emily Hart. Now, the director of community impact, Emily managed outreach programs, education initiatives, and support for underfunded shelters, all while remaining the same humble, grounded woman who once poured coffee in a downtown restaurant. Her mother had recovered well. The color in her cheeks returned, and so did her sense of humor. She often visited the office, bringing homemade cookies that the staff eagerly devoured. But the heart of Emily's days now belonged to Lily. Lily, Ethan's 7-year-old niece, the daughter of his late sister, had grown deeply attached to Emily. From the first day they met, Lily clung to her like she had found something she did not know she was missing. A motherly warmth, a friend, a patient listener who let her braid her hair during lunch breaks. Emily braided it back. Ethan, too, had changed. There was less steel in his shoulders now, more smiles in his voice. He still commanded boardrooms, still made difficult decisions, but his life no longer revolved around control. It revolved around meaning. And that meaning had a name: Emily. One late autumn afternoon, he asked her to meet him for coffee. "Just the two of us," he said with a twinkle in his eye. She assumed it was about a new project. She was wrong. When she arrived at the small cafe where they first met, the one with the same warm lighting and familiar scent of roasted beans, her heart paused. It had barely changed. Neither had the feeling in her chest. Ethan was already there, seated at the same corner table. As she approached, she noticed a folded note resting beside her coffee cup. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened it. "She's exactly who I hoped she'd be." She looked up, eyes already watering. Ethan stood, reaching into his coat pocket. Slowly, he pulled out a small velvet box and opened it. Inside was a simple, elegant ring. "You saved me that night," he said, voice thick with emotion. "And every day after, will you build this life with me?" Emily stared at him, tears slipping down her cheeks. Then she laughed. A full, joyful sound. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling. "But only if the coffee's on you this time." He laughed, pulling her into his arms. Outside, the sun dipped lower, casting a golden glow through the windows. The cafe, once the setting of suspicion and warning, was now the cradle of something pure, trust, healing, and a love built slowly, quietly, but unshakably. In that moment, past and future met, and the story that began with a note of caution now ended with a promise of forever. If this story warmed your heart, reminded you that love can bloom in the most unexpected places, and that kindness still changes lives, then we invite you to stay with us for more. At Soul Stirring Stories channel, every story is crafted to heal, to inspire, and to remind you that goodness always finds a way. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more heartfelt stories like this to life. Until next time, keep believing in love, in kindness, and in second chances.